go. All right, class has started. It is Education by Ed. It is February 11th, 2018. And Ed, teach us something, dude.
Okay, I thank you. Thank everybody for joining with us tonight. I'm going to get into taxes, income, federal, as well as property taxes, and mortgages contracts. And this is the one thing that people, when you do a mortgage, and I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and also, too, for those honest elected and public servants out there who are correcting their status to the public. We want to thank them. People are paying attention in the elected and public servant sector. Some of them are actually starting to do their oath of office, but also too, you have to work with them because, as I was talking to a couple people today, explaining because the clerks of the court used to help people with their cases a long time ago. And back in the 80s, there was a couple cases I don't have off the top of my head, but I do remember them. The clerks in the city and county were actually because they were helping people out, and so they ended up getting sued because the people didn't comprehend what they were actually doing. The people that got the information, and that is the one point that I stress to people. Do your research, read, verify what somebody's doing. If you don't understand a word, or comprehend the word, because I don't use the word to understand, because I don't understand nobody, because I don't stand beneath nobody. I don't bow to anybody either. I don't kneel to anybody either. See, that's the one thing when you kneel and bow, that means you're giving that man or woman consent. And that is the one thing that you don't do is give people consent for your structure. You have to know what you're doing in your life, not what somebody else is doing or how they're handling their situation. You can always learn because life is a learning experience. I've been through this myself. I have been through all this stuff myself. Learning the hard way. Been through the process of this hard knocks in the street, and it hurts, and I've been there as well. But life is truly a learning experience, and it depends on how you're willing to learn. And when you're willing to listen to another man or a woman that has already been through the process, already successfully made their points of view, you need to listen and pay attention to the men and women, but also to verify their structures too with two or three other people that are doing the same thing. Because a lot of people put their instruments differently than somebody else. Some use copy and paste and go right off of somebody's instrument, but when you do that, you have to be very cautious about what you're copying and pasting. You have to really do the research so that way you truly do know what you are doing. You have to know these structures. The courts don't give a damn. Okay, but you have to know how to work with that judge, how to present it to that judge. That is your responsibility. That is not somebody else's responsibility. And so I'm going to be giving some very valuable information on taxes and laws. And I will be giving the information where the cities cannot own laws. And that's been proven in the Superior Court and Supreme Court. And it's comprehending how the court works. And that is the one major point. People don't comprehend how the courts work. They want to go in and tell everybody what is doing. And they want to tell the judge basically off, but the judge is you have to tell the judge or actually inform him of his position. You always want to try, at least be polite to the black robe terrorists first. You know, and I have a cartoon I put out, and judges will tell you they're the same thing as a pastor or minister. They run the judge of the circumstances of that instrument. And these are things that you need to pay attention to these things when people are doing it and giving the information out. And once you start getting that comprehension, how it works, what it works, and this is the one thing that people will get into the court systems going, all these guys are corrupted and all they do all this stuff. Well, it is your charging instrument or your criminal charges that you're filing on different public servants that you have to do it correctly. That's why when you do it correctly, the judge is not going to go against that because he's not going to lose his pension and job or end up in jail. I just read a story here that I put up on my Facebook. Another judge just got convicted for 20 years for human trafficking. So this is the second judge this year who has been arrested for and convicted for human trafficking through their court system. So you have to start realizing that this stuff is taking time, it is coming to pass, but you folks have to do this yourself. If you don't do it yourself and pay attention to what's coming down the pike and standing up and doing this, because I mean, there's a lot of paperwork I've written that I'm going back and rewriting because I realized some things, wait, I missed a point here, or I didn't put that in correctly. So I have to sit here and realize the facts of some of my own errors, and I've been blessed that so many of these things have actually gone through with no problem. But then again, I want to correct my errors, and that's the one thing. And when you read my flyers I put out and stuff like that, I always put on the flyers that I'm the only one that could correct my status or my structure. That the courts cannot interfere with, or the court cannot rewrite it. You know, that is the one thing that people have to realize, that when you put your instruments in that says that it is correctly done and the judge knows it, they're not going to go against it. And that's the one thing that we are going to be doing tonight, going over some of the laws tonight and getting that done. And I'm getting ready to shut this other window down because I can't respond to people. Everybody wants to respond now when I get on the line. I always love how that works. And it is always interesting how that works. But anyhow, let me get back to this. Let me open up the pages here. And I'm going to first get into... I won't get into tax exemption yet, but I want to get into people so people get to comprehend the truth on this matter here. Oh, come on, Facebook. I mean, not Facebook. My writer, how come you're not bringing this letter up closer for me to read? Anyhow, I'm going to get in and start this off. There are only two kinds of taxes, a direct and an indirect tax. A direct tax is prohibited by the Constitution, not once but twice, and that was even in the 1789. You can type in 1789 tax fraud, and that will come up. A direct tax or taxes are only which are already owned, and they may be no direct tax under any circumstances short of a state of war. And this is a small state, S-T-A-T-A, small letters. So that's a state of war with your Constitution. And then only the taxes are equal appointed among the Union states. And that's a small state, so that's the Union state corporations, not of we the people state. Appointment works like this. Say the United States government wants to raise $500 million for war efforts. Say, too, California has 10% on population. California gets a bill for $50 million, and now it says that California has 25 million people at the time. Everybody pays $2. That is appointment. It does not take an accountant how much little to earn or how much little you have to pay. It completes the failure or fair. It's complicated, but fair and equal, as they're claiming. An appointment tax must be repealed 2 years in its enactment. So basically, what that's saying is that when they put a tax in, it's only good for technically 2 years, is what they claim on the circumstance. The other type of tax is an indirect tax, and that's tax particularly leveled at the point of purchase. And that goes into your alcohol, your cigarettes, your gasoline, stuff you're purchasing, except food cannot be taxed at all, period, in all 48 states. And that's the one thing. And America was established so that citizens not need ever to be pay any taxes unless he or she wishes to do so. So what is a property tax? See, this is the one thing. Oh, come on, compute. Why are you locking up? Thank you. Don't like it when my computer has a mind of its own. Anyhow, so what is a property tax? It is an indirect tax because it is a voluntary use government service. And because it's your property has been classified as a commercial piece of property. So if you don't sit there and get your property off the commercial listing and decommercialize yourself, you are saying that you are part of the commercial government and they have a right to tax you. There is no law requiring real property owner to record his property with the county clerk. So when you pay off your mortgages or your property or your mobile home or anything like that, you don't even have to register your structure with the county clerk. When you register it with the county clerk, you're giving consent for them to tax you. So you don't have to register your private property, and that includes your automobile with auto registration. In the state of Oregon, it's ORS 803.35 Section 2 says that you don't even have to have registration or register your covered wagon in the state of Oregon. So that's why I say to people, you got to read this stuff, comprehend what it is, and so that way you know what it is. Because when you register your property with this county, then the county becomes the trustee or the trustor or trustee relationship with you on your property. So you're giving them permission not only to come on your land, but to tax you when you register your property. And you can always rescind those contracts. And that's the one thing I have literally done is I've even publicized resending all those contracts in the newspaper for 21 days. Straight, 3 weeks in the paper. That was an expensive deal for 3 full pages. But I wanted to make sure I did that myself so that way I couldn't end up a conflict of interest. It was published, it was certified, and it was put into court. And not only that, I have it filed and registered in the Oregon State House and Senate in public hearings too. And it was accepted in the public hearings and filed into record. So your property is based on commercial classification and is assigned to you real property, but I guarantee you that your property has been classified either agricultural, industrial, or residential. And people say, well, I'm a resident. Well, you're claiming to be a resident. That means you are a government servant. You are classified as a government employee as a resident. So it is comprehending how this stuff really works compared to what we're led to believe. And see, you could always opt out of property taxes, but we are working on a classification on doing that basically a correct way. And one of the ways is to make sure you get a low deal title. And that means a supreme ownership over your land. And also, too, that means you have to go through the Bureau of Land Management and go back to the original land plots when that was done in 1890 in your communities. And I don't like using communities because it's another legal British term, and that way you end up giving your rights over to the cities by using that. But BLM actually has the records, and when they start questioning you when you try to get the information on it, say you're a student in a classroom. You're doing this so this way you're learning the technical terms on this, trying to do the allodial title, so that way it's a classroom project. I do stress that you stay out of the structure of telling them what you are doing for your property or land. Because once you do that, their little red flags go off and they don't want to do anything to you and help you in any fashion on that structure. And these men and women are smart. They are actually programmed and trained into this structure. And people think they're not. They truly are. And so when you start doing this stuff, you have to be smart. You have to use your wits. And you can't be afraid to stand up for your rights. Because when you don't stand up for your rights, this is how they get away with it. And this is how they get away with it. Because when you bought your land or if you get it in a mortgage, they don't tell you this stuff in mortgages. And I suggest to people, I don't tell anybody what to do because I'm not their mommy and daddy. But I suggest to people, read the mortgages too, because in your mortgage you have what they call a mortgage insurance tax. And if you don't claim that mortgage insurance tax even at the end of paying the mortgage, the bank does. They're not going to tell you this stuff. They know this stuff. And they know that for a fact. But they're not going to tell you. And that's in the Banking Act, the federal, I think it's Title 7. I had them pull that one up tonight, which I'll do that in another show, bring up that stuff on the banks and walk that through what the banks can and cannot do on their own administrative rules. Because I want to read their structure, their laws, and their administrative rules to you, because I want you to comprehend what their law says that they can and cannot do. And see, and this goes back to what they go back to the king has a allodial title to the castle and the kingdom. But that doesn't mean that the king owns your land once you purchase it. I do suggest, like I did, as I bought my purchased or whatever, I negotiated my land from the owner, the private owner itself. So that way I wasn't doing mortgages. I stayed out of all that structure, so I didn't have a conflict of interest. And that's the one thing that you try to do, that if you can do an owner contract, you have to do it correctly, but be honorable. Don't sit there and try to screw the owner and say, I've been here for 3 years and I don't have to pay you anymore or do anything like that. No. Life is about being honorable, not being sneaky. And when you're sneaky, I like it when people get sneaky. I like it when karma hits them back in the face, because you don't have to be sneaky to be honorable or to have your assets. And as soon as people start, being honorable in this country again, we would have less problems than we do. But see, even federal law and state regulations, property held is allodium. And so you have a right to claim your property. You have a right to get out of property taxes. And the one thing that has been suggested on that, first off, send them a letter and ask them for certification of the tax. There are processes, but we'll be getting into some of the process another show. I want to get into the laws first so people start putting this stuff together so they comprehend how, when you do this, how it works. See, on the county recorder, and you want to do a title research of everything you're doing, including if you have your land now, make sure you do a title research. Do not have attorneys do it or lawyers, because they work in the system, and they're going to put anything that a new survey that was done on that land without your knowledge into effect. You want to go back, like I said, you want to go back to the original land grants with BLM. and then with federal law patent, and that's with BLM. So that's the one thing that when you're doing this is putting your files together so you have them correct, you have them in order, you have the dates, and you know when the federal land patent existed. And that's the one thing that it's all done through the federal land patent federally and BLM. And BLM originally was started for land patents only. They don't have any legal authority to arrest anyone. Bill Clinton was the one who passed that terrorizing act. Jefferson Clinton, a.k.a. President whatever. So when they did that, and I even have the videos I do share and I pass out, and I believe those are on new.Oregon Tracker's website, .com or .org, that you can watch the BLM even admit that they have no legal authority or lawful authority even to arrest people. And see, this is the one thing that your elected and public employees don't want you to do this. They want you to register your land and your property so that way they can regulate a tax on it and making sure that your tax makes you a privilege. And so that is the one thing you can successfully identify, pay off your public debt. And this is one thing that I haven't researched. There's a Freedom Bond, United States. You can contact Freedom Bond 888-385-3733. And I haven't done that one yet. I'm going to check into that one myself, but I'm just bringing that out to you. You're going to check that out. And that is the Freedom Bond under the filings of the county clerk. They all have to have bonds too, and insurance bonds. So you want to make sure that you do it. And these county employees, trust me, I've been after my county trying to get these things, insurance bonds from these guys, and they protect their butts like crazy. We do have it on YouTube video with Laura Weaver, YouTube. And we have Lincoln County judges, even in court, admitting they don't have bond or registered license or even their own certification. And we've actually got it on YouTube video with them admitting to this fraud. And they tell you you can't record them in court. I've had 2 men that have been arrested videotaping me in court. Both times the juries came out, the British juries, 6-man juries, both times they came out and said, oh yes, you have a right to tape record. We want to know what's going on. So, and that's on Laura Weaver's site. One of it, her husband was the one that did the case, the last one that went through all this. And also, too, there's something called the People's Rights Academy. And their number, and I haven't verified to see if they're still in existence, but that number is 302-645-8253. And they do have programs or stuff that they can suggest to you dealing with property taxes. But these things, some of the stuff I'm giving you, I haven't verified it. I'm going off of the letter that and the information I got from individual in an interesting position that I will not bring up. Because sometimes the public employees do things correctly. They give you information and they slip it to you, and you got to learn to keep your mouth shut, protect them. And also, too, contact your tax assessor and ask them for the written explanation of the numbers of codes that appear on your property tax statement. So you got codes from the tax assessor, not all of them appear on your tax statement that they send you. So you want to get those and realize how many things they're putting on you for commercial taxes for their employment, their insurance funds, their insurance corporations, because they put all their taxes and information on your tax bill and assuming that you're going to pay for it. And explain to the tax, and I will give this letter to anybody who wants it, and it gets into explaining stuff, but write a letter to your tax assessor explaining that you have discovered an error in your tax statement. You don't mention the tax itself. It's an error question relating only to classification. Explain that your property has been mistakenly classified as agricultural, industrial, or residential. not private property or private soil, as somebody else would say too. And I would even go private soil and private property and mention both of it just for the sake of argument. Please classify and read the private structure. Ask the assessor to notify you by mail, and always do this certified mail to them, and that way you got a green card, because if they try to not respond, you have evidence. You always keep evidence. I have done some recent mails myself, and when I normally do my mailing, I always send myself a registered letter back to myself as well, so that way I know there's no conflict of interest. And it's interesting because the last one I mailed to the one of the offices in the county, it's interesting because I haven't received mine, and I should have received it a minimum 7 days ago. So I find that interesting that the mail is not returning my stuff to me. I did get their green cards signed, but I didn't get my package sent to me that I did. And always try to end your letter with sincerely, best wishes, be polite. Being polite goes a long way with some of these people, because they know their job. They know the circumstances they're in. They know they're personally liable, and they don't want to put their homes, their jewelry, their assets up for you. And that's the one thing that you have to realize. These men and women know they are personally liable. That's why they tell you I don't have an insurance bond and stuff, and they have to have an insurance bond under the Securities and Exchange Act. And if they don't, you want to file with the Security and Exchange Act to see if they do too. Because if it turns out they don't, that's a federal crime. That's jail time. That is not just a slap on the wrist. Because the Security and Exchange cannot have that going through their structure, because if that does, that means Wall Street completely falls down. And the assessor honors your wish, okay? You never see a property tax statement again. So if you do this correctly, you can do this, and this is the one thing we are working on to get a couple templates eventually up. But just remember, if we put any templates up, you are personally liable. We are not lawyers. We are not attorneys. We're not doctors. We're not anything of a professional nature. We're just men and women doing this, because we know what it's like to be taken advantage of, and we're out there trying to not only protect ourselves, and we're passing on our education, what we're learning and what we're doing, so that way you have proper knowledge and education. Because under House Resolution 192, I'm not going to be like some of these people that are just getting people filing their taxes and doing all this stuff that end up in jail. Something, I just have a conscience. Some people don't have a conscience, but unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately, but fortunately I do. So I'm not going to do that to you guys to the best of my knowledge, or the best I can. And so it is doing these things like sending them a letter saying that you want to have the clarification of your taxes through the assessor. You want to send the clerk and them the letters, especially the assessor or especially the tax collector, certified the taxes. Prove. You want them to prove in writing what you owe. And like I said, by state and federal law, and if you actually read the law, and I'm going to get into some of the laws here in a minute, it's illegal for you to tax them, to tax you at all. And I'm going to read the structure of even income tax related to property tax that the Fifth Circuit Court came out with. So, and you want to be able to certify that you are the actual owner of the land. So if you have to do that in an affidavit with a random, God, I can't even say that word, it always twists me up. But you want to do an affidavit and then the facts of the circumstances with the information claiming your assets. And so that's the one thing that when you get into this, knowing what the tax assessor do, how these men and women go after your personal assets. Because remember, these guys don't care about you. And when you're polite to them, all of a sudden they have a different attitude. They start having some compassion. Oh, come on, I want to get to this other page. I hate it when my computer freezes. been doing that to me a lot lately. I'm just going to see if it'll let me get into this one here. Okay, I'm going to get into this one. I want to get you so this way you can look at money mechanics. It is, no, I'm not closing my programs. Money mechanics, you can type that in on the internet. And it's a workbook on bank revenues and deposit expansions, I mean. And this is a workbook that the banks put out, Modern Money Mechanics. And so, and I have the links on this stuff, and I've posted them, and I believe they're on new.org and trackers. And this is the other point under 18 U.S.C. Code 8, obligation and other securities under the United States. And I recommend you type that in and read that information, because the term obligation and other securities of the United States includes all bonds and certificates and indebtedness, national banks, currency, Federal Reserve notes, Federal Reserve bank notes, that's what you use when you go to the grocery store and that type of stuff, coupons of the government, United States notes, Treasury notes, gold certificates, silver certificates, financial notes, certificates of deposits, bills, and checks. So, and these guys know this stuff. They're trained before they get in their position, and if they don't get trained, then they're going to get sued, and they're not going to do that and lose their homes. Okay, and so you can read this one here too, is exempt from taxation. 31 U.S.C. Code 3124. Tax status of interest, obligation, dividends, earnings, and other income of evidence of ownership issued by the government. Your car is an ownership, you get a title. Your land is ownership, you get a title. And all agencies and tax treatment of gain and losses, the deposit of these obligations and evidence of ownership is declared under Internal Revenue Code of 1986, 26 U.S.C. And it is apparent that you read this stuff and go back and forth and 2 or 3 times and comprehend it. Because see, once you start comprehending it, you start going, holy mackerel. And money and finances is under 31C 324 as well. So it'll walk you through the financial obligations of paper money and what it can and cannot do and who's allowed to use it. And technically, when we use it, we're rolling a debt out, and that's what people say, well, we need the debt to keep the economy going. Well, that's the one thing that I sort of disagree, because I think that we need to get back growing our food and the public forest back and having our fish and salmon so it's not radiated, and start cleaning up our planet, that we could do this so we could go out and eat off our planet without being forced into commercial obligation of getting GMO foods or any poison in the foods that you don't know, like when I do ground beef and stuff, mixing it with ammonia to kill the bacteria. You soak chicken in ammonia to kill bacteria before it's put on the shelves. Then they soak it back in water again. Hopefully it all gets out, they say. But I mean, you can type that in. And all this stuff comes up. I put the videos up from the corporations. Some of the corporations themselves have videos that you, when you look at the label of the food you're growing in the store or buying in the store, look at the company. See what videos and stuff they actually have in the corporation process of how they do their byproducts of meat. You might be sort of shocked. Stock and obligations by the United States are exempt from taxations by the state political subdivision of the state. That is the capital S, lower little t, little a, little t, little a. So that follows under the original Constitution. And that's the one thing, if you could get a certified copy from your Secretary of State or your county clerk, even the court systems, if you're lucky enough that way, get a copy of your original of the original state constitution. And also, too, if you do go to your court, ask them for a mission statement from the court clerk. Ask them for a mission statement and see if they'll certify it for you. When you get to the mission statement, you'll actually be surprised when you read that compared to what you think it is or what they tell you it is. Taxation would be a required interest and obligation both to be considered in computing a tax exempt. So they get into this stuff. They do know what's going on, but by federal law, and I have posted that up in dealing with the March 9th, 1933 Bankruptcy Act, all elected and public employees are required to pay taxes. All registered church members required. This is by the IRS code itself. All registered voters. That's why I won't vote. I don't vote. I'm out of that system. I won't take their liability and responsibilities for my home, my jewelry, my assets, my bank account. That's how people go, wow, man, they closed my bank account out. How did they do that? Well, you signed for an obligation to pay their debt. And that's one thing that people do not comprehend, how they are very sly to keep you in the system. And so it is really sly to keep you in the system. And like I said, I've got this one 3-page deal on the taxations. I can send you what I'm talking about. You could actually clip the actual links that go right even to the state corporation or the law library, because that's where a lot of this stuff is actually from the law library, Cornell Law School. And Cornell puts out a lot of good information on their Cornell Law School that is real, because those guys know what they're doing. They're not going to end up trapping themselves into a position. And see, and you want to get into Title 31, United States Code, Anointed, Title 31, Money and Financial, Subtitle 3, Financial Management, Chapter 31, Public Debt, Chapter 2, and administrative, and I always love this because everything comes back to administrative, so you get to realize that the Treasury revenue is administrative, and we do have their bulletin. That should be up on the website on taxation in this letter. That was a bulletin that was from the Treasury with Michigan government, public servants. And that way, because we the people are the government, we have elected and public servants. When people keep going to government, it's like, don't you know the government is we the people? And I always get people say, no, the government's this and the government's that. And it's like, the government is the government in foreign countries. We are the United States of 48 states. And you could even go online and read the Vernonia Treaty of 1871, and that's the British 1871 contract with the Civil War. And you have to realize that these things go back to the Treaty of 1213 with the Vatican from England. And that's the one thing, I do not support British government. I do not support anything that came from England in any book that came from England. Because that way it just traps you in. That's why the First Amendment says freedom of religion, or for religion. Because we're supposed to have a religious freedom right, and when you go to court, they're sitting there telling you what their beliefs are in their religion too. And that's even handed down. I was glad to see that President Trump fired 2 Muslim judges, because these 2 Muslim judges were forcing people to, in their plea deals or plea bargains, they were doing this to a lot of their cases or their judgments, that you had to go to a Muslim church and write an essay and bring it back, and how the Muslim religion is so good and works for the public. And so I was glad to see that President Trump fired these Muslim judges. January, that would have been, November, August and November of this last year. And so, Trump is not all that bad. He's paying attention to this stuff. He's getting it, but he can only do so much, because men and women in his position, you have to realize they like living too. It's just one of those things. We all like living, and it's just getting it out so that way we're not in a conflict of interest. So, and then when you see 31 USC code 3124A1, obligations of the United States or obligation issues to secure credit to the carrier on the necessary function of government. And this is Smith versus Smith versus Davis, 1944, 323 U.S. 111 119 89 LED 107 133 65S CT 157 161, and it explains the terminology of the United States incorporation. So the government has a debt to itself, excuse me, that people have to realize. If you're claiming yourself as a resident, a citizen, a national, you're claiming to be taking on the debts of these men and women, and everybody wonders why, wait a minute, how am I paying these debts when I'm not supposed to be part of it? When you have to realize what your standing is, what you are doing. Because the United States is not a democracy republic. It is not a democracy. Read the real structure. Even the Supreme Court has come out with numerous court cases that I post all the time, that the United States is a republic form of government, no injured party, no property damage. They cannot take you to court. Doesn't matter what court it is. They can't take you to court. So when you go to court, you have to know your standings and your position. And I do recommend you read U.S. Title 8, Section 1325. It's immigration related to internship fraud. You heard that? Internship fraud. That means if they own a business, immigrants are not technically allowed to own businesses in this country. Immigrants are technically not able to work for anybody in this country. I mean, I want you to read the law. Because if you hire an immigrant, that violates the law right there, too. And these farmers and stuff know it, trust me. I've had many conversations with some of them, and they know it. But they get away with it because in a democratic democracy or democratic republic, we can get away with it because the Democrats are covering our butt. And they have bluntly told me that they're covering their butts, so that way they can ride off and do the insurance fraud and taxes and all this stuff. And most of the time, if an immigrant gets injured on the job, they won't do workman's comp on them. They know better than that because that opens up a new Pandora box. Title 18, Part 1, Chapter 25, 514, United States Code, applies to all corporations of the United States, including any bank in the USA, including the Federal Reserve Bank. And that is 18 U.S.C. Section 8. The creditor is a private corporation of business and lending. Private script. So this is how they get us into this these terminologies and get us nailed for even paying taxes. I mean, there was a guy that ended up going to jail for even paying his child support in Texas, which I thought was very interesting. I would have loved to have some hand in that one because, I mean, paying your taxes, that is the one thing that people got to realize when child support is issued out. Where is my other page? Oh, don't tell me it shut my other page down. Okay, all right, so I got that. And then if you want to know how to sue a police officer, I have that stuff. I'm trying to get this other tax letter up, but man, it's not allowing me to do it. I guess I'm gonna have to go on my internet and try on my other side, because I don't get why all of a sudden my computer is playing the game. It's doing this deliberately. I hate it when it does this. Sorry about that. I'm gonna get into another point here then, seeing that it's doing this, because I wanted to read this deal. Okay, finally came up. I got this from a guy dealing with taxes who's in the system, and they just broke the U.S. tax system, the new income tax law. Remember, they put in a new income tax law, H.R. 1, December 2017. New federal personal income tax was enacted into law by Congress. Already made effect January 1st, 2018. Immediately legal effect. All right? You have to understand what legal and lawful are. So, in compliance, if you're not in the system, don't get in the system, because if you start doing these other paperwork that people want you to do, you're going to get screwed. They're going to come after you. Because this new tax law, even though the 16th Amendment was actually never ratified, and I can prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt. We got the court cases. We even got congressional record on that. That me and Dave have put in instruments, put it out there. We have gone after the IRS, and of course we'll never hear from them. But it is like they're trying to say that they passed a direct taxation of income under the 16th Amendment. The 16th Amendment was never passed and ratified. They passed the amendment bill on the 16th Amendment, but it was never law. It's not law. But they're doing this by administrative bill to come after you. Because remember, if you do and if you comprehend, the federal government's in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is not part of the 48 registered states of the Union. Also, too, Washington, D.C. is owned literally like New York City is. New York State is separate than New York City. Is owned by the Vatican and the Queen of England. And I do have those instruments as well to prove it up. And you can type D.C. owned by the Vatican, and it will come up. And so it strips the Federal Department of Justice naked in the courtroom of all illegitimate constitutional arguments. So they're trying to sit there and put all this structure in so that way they can put a direct tax on us now to come after us. And so, and judicial's committing fraud by when they enact or do anything under the 16th Amendment. And I want you guys to comprehend, and I put this up on the website, and I recommend that everybody read this, The Broken Tax System. And that was done by the people that filed it. It's called taxfreedom.com. And they're the ones who filed and went after the government on this when they put this new tax in, for them to prove that they had a right to do it under the 16th Amendment, which it turned out they didn't. Private property, personal property is exempt. And that's the one thing that you have to realize, that it is exempt. It's not a structure for them to own your assets. And then if they want to claim that they own your assets, you want to send them a registered certified letter, and then you want to be able to prove that they own it. In fact, the last 60 years, federal courts have been wrongfully upholding constitutional, prohibitive, therefore unconstitutional direct taxation of all alleged gross income of Americans, created as a fiction of all their labor at work, as a direct tax without appointment, under alleged authority conferred under the 16th Amendment to tax income from whatever source derived without appointment and without regard to any census or endowment. So in other words, they're just stealing money. And they know this. And I'm going to read you the Fifth Circuit Court decision here in a minute that states that if you file income tax and pay income tax, it's actually a federal crime. Because when you pay income tax, and it does follow under property taxes as well, that money, and I have proven this and been verified when I was talking to people up at the Capitol, we'll say that when you pay fines and income tax and state income tax and property tax, it goes to England. It does not go for your local services. When they pass a bill at the Capitol and the Banking Act pays the bill under 192 for the House and Senate, that's when they get the money from the disability departments, from all the agencies. It's already in the Bankruptcy Act. We the people did not go bankrupt, no matter what anybody wants to tell you. We the people never went bankrupt. The British government went bankrupt to us under March 9, 1933 Bankruptcy Act. That's when FDR put Executive Order 2040. And if you actually read it, it says any national and citizen are a direct enemy to we the people of this country. And that follows under the 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act. Because citizens and nationals are registered corporation citizens, and that actually follows under the 14th Amendment. That follows in Durrett versus Scott court case, and the Superior Court case that decided that in 1884. So, like I said, you can read these court cases if you don't trust me on them, and I don't exactly say that to a degree, but I want you to read these court cases so you can see what I've read, and what other people that, when we were working on this education, and other people come on and they bring their education and share it with the rest of us, that they're doing the research. So we're doing the research to share with us all. And also, too, if you do have public notices, New.org and Trackers does have a public notice site. So we do have that in effect, so that way you can file your stuff with us. And we do have a copyright thing, so if you do file anything, your information is your information, not ours. So let me make sure I clarify that, because we don't take ownership of your instrument or your property. It's yours. We just got a publication there that we put it out for you, and we publish it for you on our site. So that way, it gives you a little bit another outlet for publication, and so that way you are secure in your assets and property. And also, too, the fact the 16th Amendment has never been enabled to be enforced clause. It is in it. It would constitutionally authorize Congress to write any law to enforce any power alleged newly created and authorized under authority of the amendment alone. So that means they can sit there and write all these taxes to come in your home and take all your assets for their public service. So the 16th Amendment was never ratified. No states did it, and the only time when they did try to ratify it, they only had 3 states that ratified it, and everybody else didn't. I don't have those 3 on my mind, but only 3 ratified it, and nobody else would. That's why it was never passed. And so these are things that when we realize, even with property taxes, income taxes, even when the city puts taxes on your water bill, on your city taxes, on your property taxes, you want to be able to get them to prove the tax law. What gives them authority? And you want to do that so that way it puts them in a bind, because if they do certify a letter to you stating that, now you can take them really to court and really bury them. And I'm going to get into that one here pretty soon, because I got the law on that one. In the court case, that cities and counties cannot own land at all, period. And that means they can't take land for property taxes either, because they can't own land. The 16th Amendment conferred no power of taxation, but simply prohibits the previous complete and plenary power of the income tax posed by Congress from the beginning. From the beginning, taken out of the category of indirect taxes, to which is inherited belong to Staten versus Baltic Mining Company Corporation 240 US dot 103 comma 11 dash 13, and that was a court case of 1916. So if it's an indirect tax or direct tax, they have to admit to it, and they have to admit to the authority that they have a right to do it. And if you actually read your state taxes, your state income tax, it even tells you in your state income tax booklet, well, it used to say voluntary in the booklet. And some of the forms actually used to say voluntary on the old forms until about the last 10 years. I haven't seen it in the voluntary on the forms, but it used to say voluntary on the forms itself. And that's the one thing that people need to realize. Your system of your public servants is voluntary. Yes, and people say, well, the Constitution doesn't guarantee you medical. Well, the Constitution says life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and they already got the funding for that in the corporation. See, the main thing is doing the research to know what, why, and how. And once you comprehend what, why, and how, you start realizing it's interesting. Okay, in the Black Law Dictionary, excess tax or taxes laid upon the manufacture, sale, consumption of property within a country upon a license to pursue certain occupations and under corporate privilege. And that is Flint versus State Tracy Company, 220 U.S. 107 31 SCT 342. And that goes under, what does it say here too in Black Law Dictionary? Privilege tax, Black Law Dictionary 6th edition. Taxes on privileges. So if you're claiming that you have privileges, then you're claiming that you want to pay these taxes. And that's how they get away with it. And that's a court case that says privileges. Flint versus Stone Tracy Company. Okay, and this comes, like I said, and this came out of the Black Law Dictionary 6th edition. So it is one of these things that reading it, knowing the separation of indirect tax, knowing what is indirect tax, and knowing what is direct and indirect tax is all about. And it's putting this stuff together so that way you get to know what it is. And also, too, the tax form that people want to do is apparently the sovereignty, and you don't want to do give up your sovereignty to these corporations. And that is Burnett versus Books, 288 USC 378, 288 USC 403, 288 USC, or US, 405. So, and these things go all the way back to the 1930s. These cases are 1937. So we've got court cases that are going all the way back to the 1930s that are even claiming your taxes are voluntary. And the biggest case to always read on this one, I love this, is Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company. And you can type that up on the internet, and it will come up. And I recommend everybody read that court case. And that deals with Pacific Insurance Company, with the banks and everything. It's a heck of a court case to read. So when you read some of these things, I'm not going to read them all to you because I want you to sit out there. I'm bringing you to the attention to you, but I need you to sit there and read some of these things so that way you know what the taxes mean, know what the tax law is, know who it applies to. Because the one thing is, see, I've had businesses. I never went and got a business license. People say, "Oh, you went to jail over that, and you got fined." No, I never got fined in jail because I never gave the city or county authorization to investigate me with a business license. And everybody says, "Well, you have to have a business license." Well, I always say, prove the law. Show me the actual law that I have to have a business license. Well, here it is, this administrative rule. Well, that's administrative rule. That implies elected and public servants, registered church member, voters, and immigration. Prove to me that it applies to me. And I've been saying that. I mean, I started my first business when I was, 14. I mean, and that's the one thing. I mean, I remember the days because my first business I started, I was doing landscaping for the city of Fairfax, California. And I did all the weeding, mowing, everything for the city hall and the police department. And they used to pay me every week out of petty cash. I never got a check from them. I always got paid out of petty cash back then. And the cities and counties used to pay out of petty cash, but too many people were light-fingered in the petty cash that were running it, so that's how they ended up starting going to checks. And they were doing that, so that's what their excuse was, but I figured they would know who was picking in the petty cash, so they would have definitely known who, what, why, and how to do things on this. So, and I'm going to get into a couple of these other laws, so I'm going to open up the floor here in a minute, but the other one is to always read Article 1, Section 8 of your Constitution. And this is the one thing, and you can type in, what is that? The one that did that one video, Freedom, I'll come back to it here in a minute. Famous movie director did a movie, Fascism to Freedom, Fascism to Freedom, Freedom to Fascism, something like that. I'll come up with that in a minute. That's a good hour and a half movie to watch because you've actually got it where people were being tried for tax evasion, and the jury was coming out and saying they couldn't prove that there was a law to pay taxes. And there is no law. And see, that is the one thing that you have to realize, and that what it says in the law, not what these people are telling you. And yes, they're going to intimidate you. And yes, I've been intimidated when I've been pulled over, held for hostage, even at gunpoint, and had guns shoved in my face. And I've been there. And it's not pleasant, but these men and women who do this stuff, they're personally liable. That is assault with a deadly weapon. When they harm you, they can assault you, so this way you know what's going on. And that is the one thing that you have to do this stuff. It is your responsibility on this. I'm going to try to go over here and pull up a couple emails as soon as my deal comes up, because I want to get into this court case to you where the cities and counties cannot own land and property. So that's when the sheriff tries to come in and do a foreclosure on you and then give it back to the bank, because I got to find that one too, because I have a piece on that where the sheriff and police department, and I was going to pull that up before I got the show, but I had too much going on at the time, which I will get, if I don't get it right away, I'll get it next week. But this is the one thing, and I've sent it out to a few people, but I've got to go back. Maybe I can go back in one of the things in reference point in a minute. But I want you people to realize that when it comes to these taxes, you personally have to know the law. You can't sit there and assume, because everybody knows what the word assume means. And so when you assume, you're screwing yourself. You're not screwing anybody else. So that's why I always tell people: have you read this? Did you read this? Did you do that? Did you follow this instructions that they say, not what you think they say, what the court system says? See, that is the main thing, is reading what the court says, reading their administrative rules say. People say, well, they go after and do this, that, and the other thing. Well, of course they do, because if they can rape, rob, and pillage, that's their American belief. That's their way of doing things. So, all right, I see the computer is playing games with me again. Hang on a second, because I'm pulling up. All right, here we go. People basically you're complying to pay federal income tax, violates the Fifth Amendment. Information revealed that preparation of filing of the income tax return, any of it, is proposed under the Fifth Amendment. Annualized testament of witness government compels the filing and return of much as it compels, for example, appearance of a witness before a grand jury. That is Gardner versus the United States, 424 U.S. 648 1975. So basically, you're admitting when you're filing this, you're committing a crime of a grand jury of a witness. You can't be a witness in your structure. Establishing the wages and income are not equitable as far as tax and income. So your earnings, your wages, your labor are not taxable. That was decided in the court case of Central Illinois Public Service versus United States, 435 United States, 21, 1978. The other court case is People Life Insurance versus the United States, 179 CTCL 318-332 373 F2D 924932, and that was done in 1967. See, I mean, they've got these court cases, and they don't want you to use this stuff in the courts. When you write this, and when I write my affidavits and memorandums, I always put this stuff in it. Because they wrote it, there's the court case, and I love using what they write in their administrative rules and send it back to them. Because if their administrative rule says that they have to follow this and do that, you want to make sure that you're sending them their rules and regulations back to them, saying that, isn't this your rule? Isn't it what you're supposed to go by? And if you're going to hear that, they won't respond to that one because, oh my God, if they have to go by the rules and they end up not going by their own administrative rules and they committed fraud, racketeering, extortion, and involved in human trafficking, that's like the judge that just went to jail, got 20 years for human trafficking here. They're getting it. People are standing up. People are waking up. People say, well, how come they're not waving a magic wand and making sure all this happens basically overnight? You have to realize, the most thing you have to realize, the average man and woman compared to those of us who are woke or those who are waking up, who are not afraid of the chateau, as the chateau knows, most people would panic. They couldn't handle reality. Most people cannot handle reality. That's why most people live in Disney World and take psychological depressing drugs and everything else, so that way they turn themselves over to the system. It's like when a doctor tries to put you on psychological prescription drugs, and I tell people, if you do that, I don't want contact with you because you're just admitting and you're going to be under that drugs. It's mind altering. All those drugs are mind altering to keep you in the system. They really are. And people need to comprehend that one is a real true fact. So even gets in with trading in business and public office in this Fifth Circuit Court decision under the Fifth Amendment. The government, your elected public servants, because we the people are the government. Let me clarify, we the people are the government. We have elected and public servants. They are obligated by their oath of servitude, and I do put that out. And I do recommend that people write their affidavits, own themselves, put their structure, and create their own charter for their birth certificate bond. Because you create your charter because an artificial entities cannot take oaths. So these judges and corporations cannot take oaths. They cannot make an affidavit. And that is CN Empire Refinery Company, 1F SUPP 548 SD Cal 1932. So that means a judge, attorney, and I have it where attorneys, I mean, district attorneys are hearsay witnesses. That's all they are. They can't write affidavits and put an affidavit in by law. And this is, they can't make affidavits because they're hearsay. They're not they're corporations. They're not a living man or woman. The living man or woman could actually put an affidavit in, but you have to remember when you do an affidavit, you have to be honorable, because it says also too in the law that corporations cannot make affidavits in its corporation name. So when you're using your corporation name and that birth certificate, if it's all capitalized, that's a corporation name. So it's comprehending how your system works compared to what we think it works and how it works. And Rowland versus California Men's Cologne is another one, 1993 court case to read. That is 506 USC 194203, 1993. And that's dealing with affidavits of what they've done, and it's a criminal act that the corporations cannot write their own affidavits. Only a living man who has been injured can write an affidavit. And that is the one thing that you have to realize how the law works compared to the way we've been, tricked into thinking. And there was another one I wanted to get into, this one here, as soon as I could pull that up. Because I want to read a little bit from Money Magic. Because when you start putting this together and you start realizing what these things really mean compared to what we think it means, and let me tell you, it's really sad how we've been brain convinced of how things are to work. I wanted to get back on that one site because I really want to get that one here in a minute on the sheriff's and the police department, because I like to try to read that here real quick before I open the floor up here. But like I said, I will send anybody who's got on Facebook, send me a message. I'll make sure you get this information. Email, but at least email me 3 times, because right now I am almost 7,000 emails behind. And I got to sit down for 2.5 days and just go through those and really filter them out. Oh, come on. Did it come through? Yeah. There was the other one I wanted to get back into, this other law and that before I open up the floor. Don't want to read the Canal law on this one, dealing with taxes. Because, see, taxes are voluntary. Taxes do not go to your public service. And I do have the structure, too, that I do put up. It should be on the website that people, lawful Americans, are not to pay court fees. If you are a citizen, a national, a public servant, an immigrant, yes, you're obligated. But if you are a lawful American, you're not obligated to pay court fees, because you're paying a identity. So in the one book that I was bringing up with Modern Mechanics, this was actually written in the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. This is their manual that I was part of it. I was reading at. This is their manual that they educate the bankers on. And so that's the one thing that I like to, I'll be more than willing to give this out to anybody who would like to see this. This is their manual. I got some of their manuals that they go by. So I bring this stuff up to you, and so that way you know what it says compared to when people tell you, well, you have to do this and you have to do that. I remember growing up when people said, oh, you have to register and pay taxes. I remember when people told me, you have to get a driver's license. And people were saying, you have to pay taxes or you go to jail. And I started doing research when I was 14 and 15 years old. And I started going, wait a minute, the tax law says it's voluntary. And then I'm told by people around me, you just do what you're told and don't question it. Basically, do under Caesar what Caesar tells you to do. Well, Caesar could go back and where he came from, because I don't believe in any of that stuff about Caesar and the crap. I don't bow my head to that structure at all. And we're not supposed to. That's from another country. That's like Judaism and all that. That's from another country. So what are bank reserves correctly held in the bank vaults may be counted as legal reserves. So that is what they're talking about here is reserve balance. That is like when you have banking notes, when you sign a mortgage, when you sign a debt note or a check. They're holding that stuff in reserves. So that is the reserves, how they're able to borrow further on those things. And like I did mention earlier, and I'll bring it out again, that when you do a mortgage, make sure you notation on the insurance if you're doing a new one. Because it will say on it, homeowner's insurance or bank, what is it? It says owner insurance. And if you don't claim that owner insurance, the bank does after 3 years. And they don't want people to do that. And when you always get a mortgage and you sign a mortgage, because I believe you should really do it with a private party. But if you do a mortgage, make sure you get a copy of color and have them certify it, or at least, what is that? Notarize it. So that way the terms of that contract cannot be changed without your ability. Because those contracts, when the banks get them on the hard copy, they will notation or alter them after a year, and then they put them on public market in the stock exchange. And people know that because all of a sudden you get a note from another bank claiming they own the title on your company. And that's actually a fraud because you never agreed to sign for it or autograph for it unless you didn't read the contract. And some contracts actually have that in the contract, stating in the contract that they can sell that note. So you always want to clarify that, or if it says that, you want to make sure that you and the banker are in issues that they cannot do that. The bank holds it. And if you do that with the banker and they do sell that note and you actually have a certified or a notarized copy of that, that's a mandatory win when they try to come after you for another bank. They mandatory your stuff is already paid. And we already know it's paid by the autograph, by the insurance bond. But we're working on getting that out so that way we can make sure that that's done correctly instead of, and there are books on it out there and that stuff on the circumstances. So, but anyhow, I'm going to try to look up this other deal, but I'm thinking it's been in here for almost an hour and a half, so I think we should open the floor up for anybody who'd like to comment and or have some thoughts of their own on cases or something like that. So,
all participants are unmuted.
So, anybody would like to speak? Okay. Well, I guess that answers my question. So,
hey Ed, how are you?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Ed, it's Eric, Colorado here. Just want to say hello. I figured I'd jump on the line.
Okay.
I enjoy your wisdom on a lot of stuff. I do want to say that there are only a set words that our founding fathers gave us through a declaration, the Declaration of Independence and the 1789 Constitution for the United States of America. And those words that comprise those instruments are the words that we, the people of America, not American, of the United States of America, have come together and decided to live under those laws. As Article 6, Section 2, the Supremacy Clause says that this is the supreme law of the land. To very, in my heart, I believe it's very important, and I'm not an attorney, I don't give legal advice, but I think it's very important for people to comprehend that you just can't add a suffix or a prefix to a word and make it up. We don't live in a country. We live in a union of several states. You never heard the President of the United States give a state of the country address. He always gives the State of a Union address because he is addressing a union of several states. You can't just make up words like American because, you know, America English is what we were given. We weren't given American English, we were given America English. And I know these words sound foreign to you, and the reason why they sound foreign is because you were taught by foreigners your language, and your language is their language, I mean. And so it sounds really awkward to speak the Founding Fathers' language. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like you to explain that a little bit more to people, because I like what you have done on some of your work on that one.
Well, it's important that you, in my opinion, like I said, I don't give legal advice or legal opinions, but this private opinion, which I share with you in congregation, I have come to learn the words of the Founding Fathers. And when I say words, exact word phrases with exact spelling. And when you choose, like our Founding Fathers spelled choose, C-H-U-S-E, and when you choose to use our Founding Fathers' words exactly, then you have promoted yourself into their law form and are not a foreigner. And then you may act. And also another thing, in A Declaration, the first sentence of A Declaration, or what people know as the Declaration of Independence, I mean, I could say it, I'd probably botch it just by memorization, so I will look it up and give you the exactness, because it's very important to realize, and this is why I kind of chuckle at people who say that they've read all this stuff, because it's rare I find a person can, tell me where they can find it, on what line, on what page, and it's very important that people comprehend where it is, and the only way they can cite it is by having a copy. And so when you have a copy, you've just empowered yourself. So I'm going to read from the handbook. It's a Brown, the Constitution of the United States fiction book with a barcode on it, but this is a good enough example. It says, in the very first sentence of the Declaration of Independence, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve their political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. And then it goes on, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So that's the first sentence, and it's a paragraph long, but if you notice, I read it with commas. There was no period. This is one sentence, and the first sentence is telling you, if you want to act and help a system that is at absolute despotism, then you must revoke your voting rights. You must revoke your parties, your affiliations to any party. And it's really important that you do that, because if you are not a party to them, then you can act. But if you are a party to a party, then you have already stated your position and your standing. And so our Founding Fathers made it very clear Like in the A Declaration or Declaration of Independence, the very first line says that you know if you're going to do anything, then tell me why you choose to separate yourself from this. And so what I did was bring down a sworn affidavit, and you get a piece of paper from the clerk, the county clerk, and you attach your sworn affidavit explaining why you have chosen to dissolve your political bands, you know, which have tied you to one another or connected with you to one another, and you submit it, or as I would say, present it as evidence, and they will, through that system, get it to the Secretary of State's office in record, and we'll send you back the original copy.
Yeah.
So that's just that's the basis and the start of me even being able to speak to you right now, Ed, about this topic, is because I've already done this process. So now I am not in rebellion. And if you have not done what I have done, then you are in rebellion, because you're speaking out against an entity with association to a party besides we the people, one people. And so, you know, if I could, you know, hammer into anybody anything, it is this right here. How do I start making a change or effect on this despotute system that we have? Well, follow your founding fathers' words in the first sentence. You know, write a declaration or a sworn affidavit of truth and fact, that, you know, and show the reasons that compel you to a candid world, you know. And once you've done that, then you have the standing, like I do, to speak out freely without being in contempt, without being warring against the Constitution, without warring against the states. So I ask all the people that are listening tonight, and nunc pro tunc and toto in perpetuity, as some foreigners might say, listen to these words and act if you choose to. CHUSE, because that's how you spell CHUSE in America English. And if you want to speak Old English or American English, then you can go to your Blueback or your Blue Book speller books. And this is very important to look up, is the Blue Books, Blueback spellers. That's all you have to Google. And you will learn that this Union of Several States was attacked immediately by teaching children Old English or American English to them, so that they can be defeated, because they will never be able to use their original true America English that was given to us by our founding fathers through their writings. And that, you know, and in order for them to be withstanding, they must have produced an instrument that was valid or validating through the principle of law, citing that they had written something unique. They had written a language form different than all other language forms. Therefore,
I'll stop you for just a second, because I want you to look at that with the voter registration, because I literally have done that myself. And you wrote my affidavit, and the clerk does have the filing there, and they do have the paperwork there to separate yourself there, and you want to get it notarized by the clerk too, which I did, to separate myself from their system. So repeat that again, how you did it too, because I know I've done it myself.
Well, you know, it all depends what you write in your sworn affidavit or your declaration or your appendage to a declaration. As I can explain later on in other talks if I'm invited, because it's a fairly intricate subject, but it's a subject that people have to know if they're going to have any standing as we the people, that they need to know this. So I went down to the clerk of courts with a sworn affidavit in support of me dissolving my political bands that have connected myself with another, and I listed the reasons why. And some of the reasons that people could list would be fraud, constructive fraud, which is synonymous to legal fraud, voting fraud, if we want to get into their language and their law forms, or Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition with pronunciations, Centennial version, which is one of my favorite versions, because that is the version that has the most jurisprudence cited in it, being their 100-year anniversary from 1891 to 1991. So you just list the just like our founding fathers in a declaration did, or the Declaration of Independence, they list their grievances and cited why. And the first grievance our founding fathers cited was, he has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good, ! I mean, that right there says it, without a doubt. And you could replace he as, instead of the king, you can replace that with, the government form, the fictional form of government known as United States, or known as, whatever the county, whatever the city is, because there are only voting districts in a state. Everything else is fictional. If you look at the Constitution, states are broken down into voting districts. Period. End of subject. It doesn't have the sheriff in the Constitution. It doesn't have county in the Constitution. I mean, if you read, in Old English, now they had counties. I mean, this is why they had dukes and earls and, and what should I say? Names of nobility. That would hit it right on the spot, as our founding fathers, they made it quite clear that there shall be no titles of nobility. And what do we have? What do we have? We've got titles of nobility, because when you break down the state past a voting district, then in fiction you have to give a name of an authoritative rule if you create something. So, because if you create something, well, who's going to rule it? Well, then you'll have to cite that someone's going to rule it, and then you're going to have to cite how they're going to rule it, who's going to decide how they're going to rule it, administrative rules like you spoke about. And so in my belief system, if you start looking at the Constitution the way I do through the founding fathers' words, I see the first 12 amendments, which is what people know as the Bill of Rights. And I said 12, yes, because there were originally 12. Most people don't know that they threw out 2 of them, and only 10 of them came to be in the falsehood history, in the fictional history of this union of several states. And so in the first 10, what they do is they rearm the workers of the government, because if you look at the structure of the first Bill of Rights, first 10 or 12, if you want to be correct, and the 11th and 12th, or the 1st and the 2nd, I should say, never came to be in your history, but is in history. And I do have a copy of it if people are interested. Uh, so, so it's important to know that it's you have to read it, and you have to read it in a particular manner, and in the manner of just having a declaration and the Constitution, and knowing that our rights, come from God, and knowing that we have unalienable rights, and knowing all these things. Why the heck would our founding fathers allow such a declaration not to stand if they're just going to turn around and write the Bill of Rights, which gave the freedom of vote to the people who serve the government employees, because that's pretty much the only thing that in the Constitution that is allowed, is that Congress can what are the exact words? I forget. But it's all about general law. Propose, that's the word. Congress can only propose general laws. Now, general laws are not for we, the people, because general, like the general public, is not what you think general means. General is a military word. It is a word of service. And so, when you look at what Congress actions can do, it's pretty much just to rule how government is going to deploy itself while governing. How do you buy a stapler? If war is declared, how shall it be handled? The logistics of such, et cetera, et cetera. But to reign its power on we the people, no, no, no. And that is why the Bill of Rights stand, is because it is for the workers of the government. But I absolutely totally disagree with it, because I would never want to arm the workers. I wouldn't want to give them freedom of press. I wouldn't want to give them the Fifth Amendment. I wouldn't want to give them any rights.
I agree.
I wouldn't want to give them any rights, because that's how the king acted, with all impunity, with all rights. Mm-hmm. And so we can't have the government workers voting. If you work for the government, then you do not vote. If you work for the state government, you don't vote in state elections. If you work for the county government or the city municipality, you don't vote anytime when it comes to there, because you are a conflict of interest, because you are a party to. Mm-hmm. Do you comprehend that? Do you comprehend that, Ed? Do you like how I term that?
I got it. And that's the one thing that this is the one thing that we got to get people to comprehend this fact of what's going on. We got other callers, but let's take a break. We'll have somebody else speak if somebody wants to do it, and then we'll bring you back in. But I want people to comprehend, because I want to bring you on one night on this stuff, because we've known each other for a while. And I want people to start realizing, because a lot of people go off on a structure, on the different ideas or different thoughts they have, and they don't realize that the original foundation of this country is
Union of Several States.
Say that again?
Union of Several States, not this country, because there is no country.
Correction. I will always take proper criticism. Oh, yeah. But it is the union of this country, of the states.
Of several states.
Capital U, N-I-O-U-N, and that is capital S-T, or S and small T-A-T-E. Because when you use the lower state, that means the lower alphabet, that's corporation. And trying to get people to comprehend what's lawful and legal, sometimes that's a chore, and I know you've been through that yourself many times.
Well, lawful is equated to legal. They are both the same. Now, if It's just like people want to say unconstitutional. Those are words that do not exist. If you want to mean that, then say contrary notwithstanding to the 1789 Constitution for the United States of America.
Right.
Because contrary notwithstanding means what you're trying to say, but unconstitutional isn't a word.
Mm-hmm.
Or I should say it's a fictional word used by the fiction, not by we the people.
Well, hang on a second there. Let's see if anybody else would like to chime in here a minute. Let's
Please do.
So go ahead. Anybody else would like to speak? The floor is yours. Well, okay. So let's get back to this one that we're going through then, because this is the main point: is having people getting properly educated and knowing what the circumstances of the words mean. And that is the one thing that people need to comprehend, what words mean compared to what they think they mean. Because, say, it's like people get a driver's license compared to traveling or travel. And so when you use the words, especially with these words, when you get pulled over by a public servant, that's how they reply, by those words that you use. And I know Eric knows this one very well. So, and that is the one point on these factual structure. And then I've got some stuff that we're putting up. I got court cases that we're putting up, new.org and trackers, and I'll put them up on our Facebook wall. And I pass these around to some of the other people on the internet on bank foreclosures, whether it's illegal. And I want to read this part to people so that way they could see what I'm talking about, because people need to really realize one thing about sheriff and police. Section 23-17-90 of the Code and federal law, illegal arrest of any sheriff deputy without a writ warrant or process. That means by a grand jury is a warrant. Summon shall summon anyone by arrest or person or attachment their goods and appear in any court of the state. That is capital S little t a t e. Not having at the time a process justifies some summons. So if they don't have it correctly done, it's like I've been kidnapped and held for ransom going, well, there's a warrant out for you, and it's like, all right, who's it signed for? Where is it? Well, it's in, so in other words, they're just kidnapping you and having a judge sign something when they get into the building, and that is the one thing that only a correct warrant could be signed by a grand jury. And that's the one thing that when police departments and deputy are liable when they're trying to come to your house and take your property. That's considered arrest when they're coming to steal your land and foreclose on you on that. So that classifies under treason, felony, breach of peace committed in his presence. And that's basically your presence. And that's a person of treason and felony of law. And that is under State versus McAtee court case. So I'm bringing this stuff up so this way when they try to foreclose on your land, they do this stuff. There's laws that say they can't do it. And I've got other stuff that I put up, and I've got a panel list that I just sent up, and I'm going to be putting up for everybody on my walls again. And we'll get that on the website. And this is a complaint of wrongful foreclosure, fraud, neglect, quiet title, unfair business practice. And there is a link on this, and this is a court case that was done in California. I have 2 California court cases on this. And it says that they can't take your land. So it is reading this stuff, and these court cases that I have, that you can read them, take suggestions from them. You're an adult. You're responsible for your own actions. I am not responsible for you. You're not my child, and I don't have children. Most of my children have passed, so I don't deal with that one. So it is comprehending how this stuff works. And once you comprehend how the system works, and that's the one valid point that Eric brought in that I was glad he brought in on voter registration, because I've been tapping on that for some time. And once you comprehend that you withdraw your voter registration, it's your responsibility, because, see, if you're still a registered voter, you are taking responsibility for their debt, their corporation debt. You don't want their corporation debt. And as soon as you start comprehending the facts and reality of how the system works compared to what you think it works, and people want, oh, I want to get my tax credit for my child. Well, if you keep writing that tax credit for your child, you're putting your child in the system, and then when they turn 18, they mandatorily already have them in the system. And that's where you don't want to have your child, in the system. You want to make sure that if your child's 18 and they want to go join the system, that is their decision. Because when I went to school in California, 1980 was the last year that they taught civics in the classroom. And we were told the separation of democracy was the government of the corporation, not of we the people, government corporation of the Vatican. We were actually taught this in school. And the republic was free. So if you're a republic, you save your money, you invest wisely, you do what you do, you stay out of their system. You claim your rights. And we were actually taught that in 1980 in California school. In the following year, they took civics out of the school district completely, because they didn't want people to know that the democratic democracy of elected and public servants, when you do this filing and stuff, you're indebted to them. You're claiming allegiance. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ed, I wanted to make a comment. I want to correct you again. I apologize, but you know, I really apologize for corrections if it's true. First of all, we don't live in a republic either. We live in a we don't live in a democracy either. We're not democratic. We live in a union of several states with the Republican form of government.
Right.
Okay. Now that doesn't make this a republic. Well, it makes it a union of several states with a Republican form of government. Right. Now, break down what a Republican form of government is. You'll read the Founding Fathers' words citing how many it takes, how many votes it takes. Does it take 2/3? Does it take 3/4? You know, to get a state into the union, it will take 3/4 of the votes of the other states to admit them into the union of several states. Mm-hmm. Now, things, you know, is it 2/3? And so when you read the Founding Fathers' words, it shows you exactly what a Republican form of government looks like by how you vote and what the votes are worth, and what the districts are broken into, and how many of the population of we the people are broken into for how many representatives we get, on top of just being a state, as every state gets so many representatives each. I believe it's 2. So I just want to make that clear again. This is a union of several states with a Republican form of government. We are not a republic. We're not a democracy. You know, we're not a country. That's all foreign words. That's all under the Queen. It's all under the Vatican. Mm-hmm. You know, and people might turn away when you say under the Vatican, but the reason why I say that is because if you follow the money and you follow the international flow of power, you know, when you have a king of England and of France kiss the Pope's ring and, you know, offer up his kingdom and his sword, I mean, you realize that in history what has been written is that it has been given, you know, sovereign power of many of those countries, and I will say countries because we were talking foreign. They gave up their rights to the Pope, and they gave up their kingdom to the Pope. So be it. They did it, but surely we the people did not give up our anything, and this is why our founding fathers wrote a declaration and gave it to a candid world, which included all countries that were significant in the powers of the world. So thank you for the time I used before.
Republic form of government, and you are right. And I don't have a problem with that correction. In other words, because I always say the separation, as you said it too. But sometimes I slip, so that's just the way it happens.
You all do. I just have to throw that out there for people that they just need to correct their America English and start reading from the founding fathers' words. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then the one thing I want to bring up to everybody, when you are doing your instruments, doesn't matter how short they are or whatever, and if you do take your case to federal court or any state federal court, if you don't use the word corpus delicti 18 U.S.C. 3771, and that's where I have been explained by a federal judge that if you don't use certain words in your complaint or your affidavit of filing of harm, they throw it out because you're not separating yourself from the corporation. So corpus delicti is a living man or a woman. It is not the corporation. So you have to start realizing that you're a living man, a living woman. You breathe air. That's like in the United Kingdom, they passed an administrative rule in their country, and that's called, what they call it? Oh, that's right, a carbon tax. So when you breathe in and out of air, that's called carbon. So this is how they're getting away with doing this stuff to us, is by the wording. And that's the one thing that Eric was bringing up. It is the wording of lawyers and stuff like this. Another gentleman that's brought up and chimed in on this show, he personally knows this one as well. And that is the one thing that people have to realize, how the wording is so very important. You might not think the wording means anything, but you have to realize the wording is so very powerful in how you present the words. And if you don't sit there and present the words correctly, that's where the problems start happening for you and the deal. It's like now the FDA is finally admitting that the vaccines cause autism in children. People have been complaining and filing this stuff, and I'm glad to see that people are actually starting to do this nowadays. But see, if you don't file the correct wording, the correct statements and facts, this is how they get away with the stuff they get away with. And if you deal with the clerk, I actually have the laws for the clerk that I like to put in every time I file something with the clerk, county, state clerk, even city clerk, as I put the federal law in it. If they don't do their job, I can sue them, and they lose their job. By law, they lose their job. So, and I like putting it into my instruments, because when I do that, I don't have to come back and file on them. They already know, and if they don't do it correctly, all I have to do is file the federal paperwork on them. And they have actual federal paperwork and the Federal Department of Justice on this for that purpose only. And it is realizing what these public servants are supposed to do. And it's like I did a 3-week or 4 weeks, I went after Kimberly Davis in Kentucky for her issue of failing her job. And like I said, I don't support the gay and lesbians, but if that's their choice or their decision means responsibility, then I don't have a problem with that under the Constitution, because the Constitution, men, women are equal. But when they start harming anybody else, they lose that right. Period. So long as they're not affecting somebody and harming somebody, that's their, whatever. I don't like to get into that. I don't like thinking about that stuff. But like when Kimberly is saying that she's a born-again Christian, I have a problem with that, because if you're born-again Christian, did you make your amends to everybody you harmed? That's the one thing that people don't comprehend what born again Christian is. Of course, I don't. And I ask you, go do the research on what a Christian is. Read the Christian Crusades and read the Christian Crusades, especially with the what is that called? The Roman Empire government, and how both religions were combined and then they separated so that way they could confuse the people at the time. And all that's in real history, and it's been in some of their congressional books in Congress, too. They did put that in history and congressional records, so it is reading the congressional records, and that even goes back to some of the information I got from the 1800s on that in congressional records.
Hey, Ed, if I may, I also suggest people looking up the word church, Church, in Black 6th edition law dictionary. You find Jesus Christ's name in there and a definition about Christianity to answer your question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I forgot all about that one.
Yeah. Thank you. You've got the floor.
Thank you. Anyhow, yeah, I'd like to bring you back in, Eric, one night, put you on a guest, because I think that people need to hear some of the stuff you got. So, but anyhow, it's almost 7 o'clock. We've been on for 2 hours, seeing that nobody else, I'll give somebody else a chance to chime in if they'd like to. Okay, well, seeing that nobody else wants to chime in right now, I guess seeing that we're at basically the 2-hour mark, we'll call it a night. I'll get the heading out, and maybe, Eric, you give me a call, because, you know, I might want to do something on some of the Constitution stuff that you and I have personally discussed on this. We might want to do something like that next Saturday night, if you're interested.
That'd be privately discussed, yes.
Yes. Certain things we can publicly discuss.
No, I am one of those, one of the people that are going to keep you true to your word. So that's one of my specialties is the word.
I know you come up unexpectedly. I know that too.
Well, words are powerful, and we just need to speak them correctly and properly at the right time, and we the people shall be free once again.
True. So, you know, that's what I'm saying. Next Saturday, if you're into it, we'll go over a couple of things, and we'll open up Saturday with going through the Founding Father structure. I think that would be a very wise point.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Just give me a ring. We'll set that up.
Okay.
Yeah, this week.
So I will do that, and then that's what we'll do next Saturday is we'll go through the founding structures, because Eric has done extremely extensive research on this, and I know I have a lot of it too. And some of it I can get out, some of it is not to be out. So, you know, it's just one of those circumstances because it's just the way life works sometimes. But anyhow, seeing that we're going to end it, I like to say, may the Great Spirit bless you. May Mother Earth create life for you, feed you, and may the Creator look over you.
Thank you very much for listening to Education by Ed. It is February 11th, 2018, and it is currently 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Y'all have a good night, and with all these words being thrown, don't trip over your own tongue.